Okay, we are live. Let me just double check on YouTube because I'm paranoid. Okay, I think we are live. So Secretary Wu, I'm going to hand it over to you just to kick us off. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Molly. Great to see everyone. Thanks to our chair and all our members. I wanted to open up by sort of officially introducing Rachel Stevens-Parker, who is our new Executive Director for the Governor's Workforce Board. So welcome, Rachel. We're delighted to have you join us. I hope all of you have had a chance to see the release, but Rachel comes to us from the National Governors Association, where she was leading workforce and economic development work there. I had the privilege of getting to know Rachel in her prior role when I was in the private sector. We connected around, computer science, technology, apprenticeships, really engaging. And she's done some wonderful work leading on some of those sector-based initiatives. And also because of her work at NGA, she's had the opportunity to get a perspective from around the country and seeing some of the innovative things other states have done. And they brought her in to sort of help them troubleshoot. And, NGA provides terrific technical assistance. So I think that we're really lucky to have her here with that experience joining the board and have her here to work with this committee. So super excited to welcome her. And I should mention Rachel's originally from Anne Arundel County. So it's wonderful to have a homegrown talent here to lead us in the exciting work of the blueprint. I do also just want to say, super excited, like as we head into Labor Day and start of school, I've got a bunch of back to school activities myself this week for my kids. And I have a couple going into high school. And this is really the moment, I think, where a lot of the great work of this committee bringing together, educational opportunity and career pathways is really like the rubber's hitting the road now. So super, super excited to be with all of you. And with that, I'll turn it back and looking forward to the meeting and discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Secretary. And I'm pleased to kind of open and welcome everyone to the meeting. And I appreciate the warm introduction and what a great way to kick off this meeting and just how timely it is given the season, as the Secretary pointed out. I want to thank the entire CTE committee team and staff for welcoming me. I'm really, really excited to be working alongside you all and our partners at MSDE and the AIB and with the educators and employers across our state that we're going to need to engage as partners in this work to expand great career and technical education opportunities for our young people across our state. A bit of background in terms of some of my experience. Secretary Wu offered some highlights, and I do just want to add, I really started my career in workforce development kind of on the ground level, running mentoring and employment programs for adults who didn't have credentials beyond a high school diploma, the adults who did not have the types of opportunities we're trying to create. And so I got to see firsthand, I think, the power of what we're really trying to build here at a systems level. And I'm just so excited to engage deeply in this work with you all. And while I was at the National Governors Association, I did get to kind of see some different practices. And I think we're trying some things that we can certainly learn from some of our peers, and we're trying some things that are new. So again, just really thrilled to be partnering with you all in this, and special for me to be coming back and kind of doing this here in Maryland, in my home state. So before we kind of dive into some of the work for the meeting, I did just want to kind of add that as we approach this coming school year and all the work that the CT committee is going to be taking on, partnership is really going to be a core principle of this work. Like the Secretary said, we're bringing together a lot of stakeholders who all need to be part of the work that we are driving, and of our ability to achieve our goals in the blueprint are really relying on our partnerships. So I'll share more in my update in a few minutes on what that work is going to look like, some things that we're approaching as the school year begins, and how we can start to partner together. But for now, I will hold off and just say thank you again. I'm thrilled to be here. And with that, I'm pleased to now introduce the chair of the CT committee, Myra Norton, to provide some opening remarks and walk us through what we'll be doing here today. Chairwoman, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And on behalf of the committee, we're all very excited for you to be here and look forward to working with you on this important work. So hello, everyone. We've got a very full meeting today, lots of good things to cover. We're going to be talking about Rachel's going to share a pretty extensive report on just where we are on a number of the initiatives that are part of this committee's work. And so a lot to be excited about there. And then we got some housekeeping stuff that we'll deal with. And then we're going to really dig into the expert review team pilot program draft. So excited about what the team has put together here and looking at how we really kick off this school year, laying the foundation that will allow us to then scale that program in the years beyond. So we'll talk through that. And then also, as we have committed in prior meetings, we take any questions that are submitted either during this meeting or following the meeting, and we do one of two things with them. One, we reach out to whoever submitted the question, so they're getting an answer from someone. And number two, we're creating an FAQ that's a live document on the website that is capturing all the questions that get submitted, and the answers are there so that anyone is able to see what questions have been asked and what the responses are. And we'll talk a little bit more about that process at the end of the meeting. I do just want to share that we've got due to some logistical constraints, we can't actually answer questions submitted in the live chat, like live in the meeting, but any question that is submitted will be responded to, again, both personally and then also incorporated into our FAQ. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Rachel, to share some of the great progress that's being made.
Thanks so much, Myra. And before we do that, I think Molly, would you like to do a quick roll call and make sure we've hit our quorum?
Absolutely. So the members present are Brian Cavey, Myra Norton, Michael Thomas, Secretary Wu, Secretary Rye, Matt Holloway, and Deborah Montgomery. So we do have 7, so that is a quorum. Thank you, Rachel.
Awesome. Great. We did it. Well, it's great to have you all here. I'll start with running through a few updates, beginning with staffing. You all heard the first staffing update, which is about me, but we have some more. First, I'm excited to welcome John Strickland to our team. John is our new expert review team manager, and he has been working in education for many years, most recently as an assistant principal on the Eastern Shore. And John, you're here. Would you like to introduce yourself and say a little bit about your background?
Oh, yeah, sure. Hi, I'm John. And yes, like Rachel said, I've been in education for like most of my adult life. Most recently an assistant principal here on the Eastern Shore. I moved here about 12 years ago. My wife is an educator as well. I've taught kindergarten in the past. I've taught middle school math, but I'm pumped about this chance and this opportunity to work with you guys because one of the things I'm most passionate about is like give opportunities for them to be their best selves, and working in this environment and seeing education from this side of things really is like an exciting thing for me. And I've been meeting with CTE teachers, CTE directors across the state for the past month and a half so far, and we're doing amazing things out there. That's the one thing that I've pulled from this. And so, just partnering with them and collaborating in that way has just been really exciting for me. So I just appreciate your time, and I'm excited to work with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. And I love that. We're pumped too. I know we'll talk more about our expert review team pilot plans later in the call today, but I want to briefly say on this point, we're so thrilled to have John on the team with his background in education and his kind of networks and knowledge of some of the challenges that educators are facing and that we need to be supportive of as we deploy our expert review teams. It's important to us as we develop our pilot and test out how we're going to run our expert review teams, that they're not seen just as monitors, but really as a support system and resource to CTE educators to really help the entire system achieve our shared goals. So I know our presenters will talk more about that later on, and I'm really looking forward to it, but I did just kind of want to underscore that. And John, we're really grateful to have your experience and insight as part of our team. Okay, so back to a couple other CTE committee staffing updates. As our committee members are already aware, the CTE committee program manager, Allie Carter, has moved on to a new role, and we're very happy for her. Sad to lose her, but happy for her in her new role as chief of staff to a state senator. We're very thankful for the work Allie has done with the committee so far in setting us up for some of our future activities. I know that she'll continue to do great things. We will be posting a job posting for her replacement soon. So we'll share that with our interested parties once that is posted. And we hope you'll help us spread the word. We're hoping to find great candidates with experience and expertise in CTE for this position to contribute to the work ahead. So thank you in advance for your help sharing the word about that opportunity. Moving on from staffing updates, I'll turn to our implementation plan. This is kind of the CTE committee's broad implementation plan for our body of work that we submitted to the AIB earlier this summer. We will be meeting with the AIB team in the next few weeks for feedback from them on our initial implementation plan, sort of as a planned part of the process of really refining that implementation plan. We will share feedback we receive, that our staff received with the committee to discuss how to address the feedback at a future meeting if we need to kind of have some discussions about that. At the time of the meeting in which we will receive our feedback from the AIB, we'll find out if we need to resubmit the plan, but it might just be that there's some kind of feedback delivered that will tweak some of our activities going forward. Also on implementation, prior to the state agency implementation plan approvals that the AIB is also issuing, such as ours, I should say, the AIB evaluated all 24 local education agency or LEA plans. And so in late July, the AIB approved 20 of those plans and conditionally approved 4 other plans pending submission of updates to their career counseling MOUs. And so, I think just an interesting note here is that some common areas for improvement in the LEA plans that the AIB kind of noted were around career ladder development, high quality school day tutoring, comprehensive math and literacy plans, college and career readiness supports for students who are not yet college and career ready or on those pathways by 10th grade. So those were some interesting notes kind of received back that we just kind of wanted to share out with the group here. On August 1st, the AIB released their updated implementation plan for their entire blueprint. And there were a few changes to note that are pertinent to the CTE committee. So I want to just quickly kind of run through those. The first is around state agency implementation plans. That includes the CTE committee. Those are now going to be due June 15th of 2024 instead of March 15th, 2024, which we're very grateful for, those extra few months. This next phase plan, the plan due June 15th, 2024, will focus on fiscal years 25 through 2027. Sorry, 2025 through 2027. The CTE committee is required to submit a report to establish yearly statewide goals as part of this plan, and those goals will contribute to reaching our 45% target by the 2030 to 31 school year for the percentage of high school graduates who are completing the high school level of a registered apprenticeship or another industry recognized credential. The AIB's updated plan is making a recommended legislative change to update the report dates on that report around the statewide goals to June 1st, 2024. So we'll have a few different summer deadlines next year. As the committee is required to kind of monitor progress toward that 45% goal, the AIB has also added a provision that state agencies share relevant data on CTE progress with the committee. So we're kind of working our way through the best way to coordinate that data gathering to support our development of our plans and tracking toward that 45% goal over the next several years. The final change of note is that the AIB has added language that the CTE committee will submit a plan for developing a statewide framework for CTE, including rigorous CTE pathways, which was in the blueprint, but the AIB added the framework language specifically to the plan as well. So that is a sort of some work that we will need to be taking on as part of the plan development that I just spoke of. Turning to technical assistance, the AIB launched a new technical assistance grant program for this current fiscal year that we are now in. This grant will pair strategic facilitators with LEAs and or with the CTE committee to support the development of the next implementation plans due in 2024. So that is an opportunity for us to get a little bit of additional support in addition to LEAs getting some support on this. The grant is currently open for vendors to apply as strategic facilitators. The AIB will then review applications and select facilitators. And each entity, including CTE committee, will have the opportunity to kind of indicate preferences from the list and interview potential facilitators to support their work. And those interviews will take place next month in September. So the idea here is to have contracts for this technical assistance up and running by October. The CTE committee has already submitted its intent to participate in this grant. So as I said, we're looking forward to hopefully getting some of this support, and we see this as a great chance just to get even more expertise with our team to assist in our strategic planning approach. So I'll stop there for now on kind of our implementation plan. That was kind of a few components of implementation plans and reports. Any questions or comments on anything I just walked through? And I'll invite Molly to help me answer any questions. It's officially 2 weeks today, so in case I don't have the answers. But any questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll keep moving. If you come up with some later, that's fine. We'll have another chance. I'll move now to occupational skills standards, another one of the core kind of tasks for the CTE committee under the blueprint. The CTE committee has extended its contract with the Jacob France Institute and with the Urban Institute. They helped draft our implementation plan for the CTE committee, and we've extended that contract so that they can assist us with the development of some initial occupational skills standards. And as kind of a recap, the blueprint requires the CTE committee to create a CTE skills standards advisory committee to also support the development of occupational skills standards. The purpose of this committee will be to kind of make recommendations toward these standards and help develop and then regularly update a really comprehensive and cohesive set of standards that will be applied across the CTE system and across the programs that will be rolled out over the next several years as part of the blueprint to really help strengthen kind of the program offerings and clarify what the skill standards need to be for various occupations. And for those, just a kind of recap on what we're talking about here, occupational skills standards refers to kind of a comprehensive set of career advancement guidelines. These are developed with strong industry input and need to include standards for each occupation in any given profession or industry, and specific steps and accomplishments or kind of measures needed to make progress in a given field. And that really kind of sets out what skills a student is going to need to demonstrate to show that they have actually, what skills they've obtained and that they are prepared to receive a credential and move into an industry. So these are really important kind of guiding framework and standards that will be a just critical piece of infrastructure for all of the CTE work in the blueprint. And these are meant to be guidance really, for instructors on curriculum, for students to understand pathways, for employers to understand, what they need to provide in on-the-job training, and also, to have them be that feedback loop to make sure these skill standards are always up to date with what the industry really needs. The Urban Institute has great experience in the creation and use of these types of standards. They've worked on a contract with the U.S. Department of Labor to build competency-based occupational frameworks for registered apprenticeship. So we're pleased to be working with them in the development of our standards. And we felt that before the CTE committee creates this advisory committee, we wanted to work through some of the logistics for really the process of developing these frameworks. Who do we need to engage? What steps do we need to take to really be smart about this and get it right? And to ensure that we have the right members appointed on the Skill Standards Advisory Committee. So I will kind of close there on our Skill Standards Advisory Committee. I'll pause there for questions on this piece. We have a little bit of work to do this fall to get this kind of set up, but we're really excited about this. This is really critical. And I know we'll be kind of digging.
I have a question about, because when hearing about the occupational standards, that's obviously feels a little bit daunting and like boiling the ocean. But what I hear you saying is that because the focus is really on CTE schools, like thinking about how we focus our efforts based on, the high demand areas in Maryland where, CTE programs are concentrated, what is the most, value added area to build out the pathways. Like that's the way the work is being structured, right? I just wanted to.
Yes, no, that's a great question and an important clarification. And Molly, I see you came off mute, so please do feel free to chime in. But I think that kind of mapping out some of those steps and how we want to approach building this and kind of taking pieces of it step by step is going to be a really important part of our next couple of months as we kind of, like I said, nail down the steps before we set up the advisory committee. And Molly, please feel free to elaborate.
Yeah, no, I think you both said it perfectly, right? It's about identifying what are the occupations that we need to prioritize first. And it's both, what are the in-demand industries? Where are our CTE students currently going? But also, what are the jobs of the future? What are the projections 5 years from now, 10 years from now? So so I think that's really our first initial steps in this project. We're working with the Urban Institute and the Jacob France Institute is identifying those occupations. And then down the road, in 2 years from now, what's our updated, like, what are the occupations we're going to work on at that point and so forth. So it'll be ongoing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Molly. And so, yeah, we will be kind of revisiting this with the CTE committee as the initial set of occupations are identified, and as some of those frameworks are built out, so that we can kind of see how that's going and see how we want to improve on that, both process and kind of frameworks themselves for the future. Secretary Rye, I see a question from you. And hello, nice to meet you over Zoom.
Yeah, welcome back to home again. Really exciting to have you here. Looking forward to be working with you. I think that everything I'm hearing is just music to my ears.
Great.
We have waited for this for too long. One suggestion will be looking at sectors.
Yeah.
Within the sectors having different CTE requirements. To give you like healthcare sector, huge opportunities. So giving an example, let's say CNA. So a student gets a CNA entry level skills, get $45,000-$50,000 job. Then what happens, right? So within the sector, if we can create guided pathways for students, you start with a CNA, and you can get some credit for prior learning and other things, and move slowly towards an RN and then BSN program, while working, gaining more experience and things like that. So certainly healthcare, teaching, some of these IT and other areas are tremendously important for our state, and our own labor data indicates, high needs in those areas. I think sector-wise, what CTE opportunities are there, then the guided pathways within that sector for career advancement, I think will be important. The other thing is that a tremendous amount of resources, and I think it's the right thing to do, for career counselors.
Yeah.
And I think that each jurisdiction is implementing it differently, and which is fine. Whatever works for local level, I would be supportive of that. But I think we need to have some common expectations from all of them. In some places, career counselors are reporting to the workforce unit of the region. In some places, they are reporting to LEA. That's fine. But I think these career counselors, who are these career counselors? What is their background? Again, going sector-wise. Do they have expertise in certain sectors? Or they are just expert in counseling?
Yeah.
Right?
So
I
there's
think
a big difference there.
Yeah, expertise in counseling is necessary, but it's not sufficient, because that's why we are in this problem, right? So we don't want to do more of the same. So how do we take these counselors and make them career counselors, give them opportunities for careers based on the sectors that are strategically important for our state? So I think that's where we have some opportunity to make some recommendations. Again, wonderful. It's looking all so exciting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that was music to my ears. And I almost wonder if you were listening in on some of my recent conversations with Molly as I've gotten started these first couple of weeks. I actually will turn my updates. I'll skip one, Molly, and then I'll come back to the Apprenticeship 2030 Commission after I talk more about our career counseling updates. And I think Secretary, you raised a great point, really in how these things are interconnected and why it's so exciting that we're starting to do this. And we're sort of starting to deploy and develop different pieces all kind of at the same time, and knowing it'll come together after we've kind of tested a few things out. And but before I get to career counseling updates, I'll pause and see if there are any other questions or comments on the skills standards piece before I move to career counseling. Okay, and hearing none. So on the note of career counseling, kind of update on where we stand, recognizing this is a huge part of what we're doing, and career counselors they're going to start going into every school here this school year. CTE committee staff have been working with our partners across Maryland Department of Labor, the IB, local workforce development boards to kind of develop more support for these new career counseling programs that are getting started up. And Also, as a reminder for some of our listeners, the Blueprint created a new career counseling program, and the purpose is to provide every middle and high school student with individualized career counseling services to learn about post-secondary education, other types of career preparation options that align with their interests and lead to great jobs and family-sustaining careers. And as the secretary was kind of pointing out here, it's really important that these career counselors provide something that many students were not receiving previously from counseling services available in schools. And that kind of ties to who these counselors are and the information they're getting to use and tools they get to use in their counseling service delivery. So that's kind of something we're starting to roll out this year. And as the secretary noted, the models are looking a little different. And so it provides us a chance to see kind of what works and how different models work. And also to your point, the metrics we use across the board to kind of measure what they're doing and how it's working will be really important. So we can kind of compare different models and kind of start to develop, just continue improving the guidance that we deliver in future years. So as of where we stand now, every LEA is required to enter into an MOU with their local workforce development board and their county's community college for this school year. And CTE committee staff have worked with the AIB to evaluate all 24 MOUs. 23 are already approved. The AIB is just waiting on the resubmission of one more that just had some minor tweaks to make. And of note here, a lot of good submissions. Most of the revisions required submission of a budget and or a career coach job description. So again, some of the revisions that were getting sent back for the MOUs were really kind of to make some of those things more specific. Who are these people going to be? What are you looking for? And how are you going to deploy the funds? CT committee staff and the AIB will also be meeting with each district individually. We're aiming to do this in October and November. And we're going to have these meetings to discuss the career counseling programming in further detail. After the MOUs were developed and you completed your hiring processes for these counselors, how's it going? What's it looking like? Tell us more about the kind of final design of your program as it's getting off the ground. It'll also be a great opportunity for us to learn about kind of the types of supports that are going to be needed, in the short term and longer term. Additionally, the CT committee has provided technical assistance to the local workforce development boards, or as I should say, kind of plan for provision of this technical assistance by entering into an interagency agreement with the Tri-County Council of the Lower Eastern Shore to produce an RFP to procure a vendor that has expertise in career counseling. So not just counseling, but really that career counseling focused piece to support the development of these programs and to kind of bring that expertise into our work. So additionally, some other assistance will be provided by procuring a vendor to do a benchmarking study. So some expertise on the career counseling best practices, as well as a vendor to help us with benchmarking to analyze these programs, as I just kind of spoke about briefly. We will also be having them support us with a teacher and career counselor externship program to kind of help ensure there's that greater connection between kind of what the counselors and educators understand about career needs and the kind of seeing it directly with employers. The RFP for the career counseling vendor and the benchmarking study have been released. They're out in the open and we're taking applications. We'll be reviewing those applications later this month. So looking forward to that. Also, just a quick reminder that the Maryland Workforce Association, which is the association of Maryland's 13 local workforce development boards, is hosting their annual Raising the Bar conference in mid-September. And I wanted to point that out because their pre-conference day on September 11th is a whole day focused on career counseling. And CT committee members and members of the public are invited to attend. My team and I will be there learning and engaging in the discussions as these programs are getting up and running as the school year starts. So we're really looking forward to that and welcome you to join us. Please feel free to reach out to me or Molly if you'd like more information on that and on the pre-conference. In the coming months, last update on career counseling, we're developing concepts on some further guidance and some of those potential outcome measures with respect to career counseling to bring to the CTE committee for discussion. So as we kind of bring on some of these vendors and we start the conversations around guidance and outcomes on career counseling that we want to be measuring, we will bring this back to some of our future meetings this fall. So Secretary Rice, certainly look forward to your thoughts on that and to the rest of the committee as well. Okay. Any questions on career counseling? There was a lot of updates on career counseling. We're really excited about this. Okay.
I just want to endorse what you said, Secretary Wright, about the common expectations, right?
Yes.
How do we create that, and also draw upon our network of resources to support those counselors with real live individuals from employers or opportunities for on-site visits or whatever it will be to help them build out their arsenal of tools in a way that'll be interesting and engaging for students. So
Thank you. It's a great suggestion. Thank you. Great. All right. Any other questions or comments on career counseling? Okay, and then I'll do my last update. This one's short, and then we'll move on to some other presenters. Quick
Sorry, guys,
update.
my Zoom accidentally quit, so
Welcome
we are
back.
still good, but I'm here anyway. Sorry.
No, I'm glad you're back, Molly. I didn't even see you go. I'm sorry about that. But glad you're back. Last quick update, Apprenticeship 2030 Commission wanted to kind of add an update here quickly, since there's certainly some intersection between these bodies of work. A little bit about the Apprenticeship 2030 Commission. Legislation that passed earlier this year formed this commission with the goal of making recommendations back to the legislature to expand registered apprenticeship and do so in support of the Blueprint's 45% goal. So the commission consists of several members of the Governor's Workforce Development Board and the CTE committee or their designees, including myself as the designee for the chair of the Governor's Workforce Development Board, and Myra Norton as the CTE committee chair. Brian Cavey will be on as the MATC chair, and we also have several state agency representatives from the agencies represented here, in addition to several General Assembly members and employers and other leaders in apprenticeship. So we're looking forward to starting those conversations. It's going to move pretty quickly. The commission is starting to meet in September, and we'll have a report of recommendations in December. So yeah, moving pretty fast, but we're really happy to see the connections between these, the kind of representation on these groups, so we can ensure close alignment and support with the Blueprint goals. So we'll keep committee members here updated on the activities of the commission and really encourage members, should you not be part of the Apprenticeship 2030 Commission, please feel free to share any questions, feedback, thoughts, ideas with me, with Molly, with Chairwoman Norton, or others, that are represented here on the committee who are also on the council. So we really look forward to representing our work in those conversations. And we'll report back when there's more to report back. So I think with that, unless there are no other questions, I think that might be my last update. So any questions before we move on to committee member updates? Cool. Okay, great.
I just want to jump in just for the record that Sharnetta Young is also here as well.
Thank you, Molly. And hi, Sharnetta. Thanks for joining us. Okay, before we move on, do any committee members have any announcements or updates they would like to share? Okay.
I think you did such a comprehensive job of
I did talk a lot.
sharing. No, it's great. It's so good for folks to understand. There are a lot of moving pieces to this, and I think I'm excited about the 2030 Commission. I think that's having a lot of cross-pollination between our group and that group. Really, we can bring to bear even more resources and thinking about how we achieve this very audacious goal. And so I'm excited about being a part of that work and as a committee, us continuing to drive forward here. So thank you.
Awesome. I know, me too. Yeah, we have a big goal to hit, and so more support toward that will definitely be awesome. So yeah, looking forward to that. If there are no other updates from committee members at this time, I will go ahead and actually, Myra, I'll turn it back over to you for the next item on our agenda.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so the first item is boring, sorry, but necessary. So as part of the Open Meetings Act, we have to have an Open Meetings Act designee. We previously had asked Mike DiGiacomo to serve in that role, and with Rachel's coming on board, I'd like to propose that we designate Rachel to be our Open Meetings Act designee. And so if everyone is good with that, I just need a motion to do so.
So moved.
So moved.
Great. Can I have a second?
Second.
Awesome. Any opposed? Great. Rachel, thank you. So we got that house cleaning out of the way. I did want to just share with folks, we originally planned to present the Perkins MOU with MSDE in this meeting, and then sort of realized Rachel's just come on board. She needs to get up to speed and look at things. We identified a couple of small areas that needed to be tweaked. The folks at MSDE and the team here have been working collaboratively really well to put together an MOU that I think is going to serve all of the constituents really well. And we just want to make sure that all the right people have eyes on it before we bring it to a vote here in the committee. So we plan to do that in our next meeting. Rachel will have a chance to go through it and make sure she's reviewed it, and the team here and the team at MSDE will continue to put any final touches on it. They've already done yeoman's work to get this to such an incredible place. And I think I just want to echo, Rachel, you said earlier, the underlining collaboration. And I feel like we are really feeling that with our friends at MSDE, and we're really working well together, because this work, it is both macro and micro, and we can't forget either one of those pieces. It is really important. And so, working together to remind each other of both of those factors, I think I've just been really inspired by the level of collaboration. And, I think everyone here is inspired and motivated to get this work going in service of students here in the state of Maryland. So it will be excited to share that final document with everybody at our next meeting. Okay, the next piece, also an exciting piece, is we want to share the expert review team kind of pilot recommendations. So I am honored to introduce Jackie Kramer, who is from the National Center for Education and the Economy, also known as NCEE. We can't have a meeting without a bunch of acronyms, so I'm going to try to use as many as possible. NCEE worked with both the Kirwan Commission and the AIB on the blueprint, so they have deep expertise in this area. Also just have broad experience evaluating global best practices in education, so we're very grateful for their support in this effort. The CTE committee has contracted with NCEE to assist in the development of our expert review team pilot plan. And so, Jackie, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk us through.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that intro. My colleague Charlotte, who's on the phone, is going to share a short PowerPoint. We only have a couple slides, so no worries. And I know Molly sent a copy of the plan out to all of you, so you've had a chance to take a look at it, but I'll just take a few minutes to go over some of the highlights, and then happy to have a conversation and invite all of you into it, and Molly and John as well, who've been chatting and working with us to think about this for the last couple of weeks. So anyway, I will get started. You've already reviewed our first slide, so I don't really have to spend too much time on this, but I just thought I'd introduce our organization. And again, that we had done some of the work with the Kirwan Commission to help them think about what were high-performing systems globally and in the US, and what could we learn from them to inform our work in Maryland to help strengthen the education system broadly, including the CTE system here. We've done a lot of this work for many years. This has been what we've been doing, is looking across the world at global best practices. And the expert review team is a practice that we've seen in many high-performing systems, and sort of brought that to the attention of the Kirwan Commission. As you know, there's an expert review team process going on with MSDE across the state, looking at schools across the state, but this is the second piece of that, to look at CTE programs specifically, which is not something that we've seen internationally, but it was something that the commission thought, because this work in strengthening the CTE system in Maryland was so important, that they wanted to bring this practice to see how this could support the work over the next next decade in Maryland. So we can move to the next slide, Charlotte. And I'll just quickly go over the purpose and goals of the review teams. the pilot year plan and the initial structures that we've talked about, we've proposed to date, and sort of what the scope of the full implementation is. We can go to the next slide. As we've talked about, the purpose in the legislation of the expert review teams is to monitor whether schools are implementing CTE programs. And the idea is really to sort of monitor progress across the state toward the blueprint goals of strengthening, expanding, and making more equitable access to really high quality CTE programs for students in the state, and monitoring progress toward the goal, the 45% goal that Maryland has. And as part of that is really looking at the CTE program in the schools and identifying issues that the schools are facing as they try to meet the new quality criteria that the CTE committee will be recommending, develop recommendations to address the challenges faced by schools and across districts, and try to provide policy advice and technical assistance to address those challenges. And doing that in coordination with MSDE and with AIB. We can move to the next slide. And then the question of why a pilot year, I mean, there's a simple explanation, is that there's no funding in the next year to launch a full ERT program, but it also really gives us an opportunity to plan the work thoughtfully and in partnership with stakeholders, with MSDE and with AIB. And as part of that, really thinking about how to collect baseline data across the state to really better understand the current state of Maryland's CTE program, so that as we monitor progress, we know where we're starting from, and to collect the kind of data that we need to inform our thinking about how to organize the program going forward, and how to decide which schools to be visiting at which points during the next number of years. Another piece, which has been part of the conversations we've had so far to date, is to really align the ERT work with the other work that the CTE committee is doing now in creating the framework for CTE in the state, thinking about the occupational skills standards work that's going on, thinking about the work that MSDE is doing on their own expert review teams, which also cover the post-CCR pathways in those schools, which is part of CTE, and thinking about how we can sort of leverage each other's work and share our work. Also do the work of developing the tools that the teams would use and the protocols, and thinking about what kind of training needs to happen for people who are going to be on the visits. And as we said before, getting input from folks across the state, including CTE schools and CTE leaders, to really think hard about how to make this, as Rachel said, a process that really supports the work going on in the schools, informs all of our work, and is not sort of seen as a monitoring or compliance exercise, and really sort of engage schools in being part of thinking about how to make this a process that's reflective for them, that helps us really sort out what kind of supports that they do need, and to begin to sort of build the thinking and the excitement across the state for doing this work going forward together. We can go to the next slide. And you know, in a sort of overall plan for the year in the fall, our plan is to focus on really thinking through parts of what this plan will involve, how we're going to select schools, what kinds of tools and protocols that we need to develop, beginning to develop those, thinking about how to structure the visits, thinking about who's going to be on the visits, and how we're going to collect the data we need before we go to visit schools, how we're going to organize the data that we collect while we're at schools, and then how to think about putting them into reports, and thinking through how to use that data, how to help inform our thinking about policy and technical assistance that the individual schools and the system will need. And then in the spring, trying out some of this stuff, doing a small number of visits with the teams that we can pull together at that point, and doing some thinking about you know, whether we're going to visit schools in each region, whether we're going to visit a regional center and a high school type program, or urban and rural program, sort of thinking about what the range of schools and CTE programs that we will be wanting to serve, thinking about how to organize the data that we collect, and then refining the tools and protocols that we've developed in the fall based on that experience. And then finally, really trying to think through how to create an aligned technical assistance effort in coordination with MSDE and AIB based on what kind of data and what kind of feedback we collect from the school visits. We can go to the next slide. And I think most of you know this, but just a general idea of the scope of the program. We have an 8-year timeline. The legislation requires that all schools with CTE programs in the state are visited. The current number is somewhere around 230, but Molly tells me that's a bit of a moving target. And if we're expanding programs over this period of time, my expectation is that that number may grow. So we're going to have to sort of think about that over time. Based on this kind of number, we're talking about a range of 30 to 35 visits each year of those 8 years. And then we can go to the next slide. And again, this was in the plan that was sent out, but in our conversations this summer so far, we've been talking about kind of a core staff to do the expert review team work, which would involve a director for each region in the state. And we were thinking of the state as having 3 regions. Identifying a CTE lead teacher for each region, probably a part-time person, with the idea that that teacher would provide some consistency across the visits in each region. So would be able to sort of, be able to compare schools to each other when they are visited. And then that this work would also need to be supported by someone who would analyze and collect and monitor the data. And then we need CTE policy expertise as well. And in terms of the review team members, the people who would be on the visits, those folks would be on the visits, perhaps, we've had some conversations, and I think this is something to discuss about, seeing where and when we could include the data analyst and policy experts in the visits, but certainly the CTE lead teacher and the regional director, and then additional ERT members for each visit, including what we proposed is the idea of a second highly regarded CTE teacher or school leader to join each visit to provide a different perspective from the CTE lead teacher. For example, if the CTE lead teacher is someone who comes from a program around healthcare industry work, that a second teacher could provide a different perspective, either from a different industry, a different kind of program, perhaps somebody who teaches the academic support for a CTE program. And that our idea on this is that the folks who would fill this kind of role might be nominated by schools or districts as to participate in this work as part of a professional development work for them, and be part of helping us identify lead teachers who can begin to develop the kind of peer networks and peer-to-peer work that we'd like to see happen, and supporting the work across the state. And then the other members would be representative from community colleges. And, it could be a range of types of folks from the community colleges. That is something that we need to think through this fall. And then industry representatives, again, with a mix of folks from industry associations, from workplaces, trade union, and apprenticeship or internship sponsors to provide that perspective as well. And I think that's our overall summary, and happy to have a conversation and bring other folks into the conversation, as Molly and John and others have been talking with us about all of this.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions, but let me yield the floor to my fellow committee members. Anyone have any questions, comments, any concerns with the pilot plan as presented? Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I've got quite a few questions, comments, whatever. We address them as we go through. And I didn't make any statements when we were talking about skill standards advisory committees, but almost everything that I am about to say, all the comments that I have, you can swap out expert review team for the skill standard advisory committee. And I think that they're all kind of same, because they're related. They might not be, but but they are. One of them being that I think that we need to call them committees or teams, because I don't think we need one. I think you need them to be, plural. And the reason is that we're talking about all these different occupations. And I'm from the old world apprenticeship in construction, and we've been doing apprenticeship for a long time. But everybody on this call, or most people on this call, have heard me say in the past that I don't think that there's an occupation in the world that can't be trained through apprenticeship. We may need to adjust how we do it, but there is, that as long as we have OJT and related instruction in a structured manner, we have apprenticeship. And that there is a lot of things that can do that. One of the things that about representation, well, first let's get back to the funding part. Normally I think that we have pilot programs because we need to practice, right? You don't get good at something without practicing. So a pilot program to me is the practice. We run a pilot program and we can make changes, we can fix things, and then ultimately, come up with a great program, but that the pilot is just part of the implementation. This sounds like it's pre-implementation, and it's because our legislators decided to pass legislation without enough funding. Thanks, guys, but there's my 2 cents on that. But that that when we create these committees and teams, we got to make sure that there's representation from that occupation. And I know we mention it, but to have 2 people from an occupation, and that's what I took as being 2 times, as being 2 representatives. I don't know that that's enough. We need subject matter experts in every committee, commission, team, everything we create. We need a subject matter expert. I consider myself a subject matter expert in the construction world. I've spent a whole lot of time in the construction industry. I consider myself a subject matter expert in apprenticeship. I've spent my entire adult life as either part of or participating or administering an apprenticeship program. So that I think that I could help with both of those things, but that I am not an employer. I'm not a manufacturer. I'm not and I do consider myself an educator. I'm not a public educator. I'm an educator in my apprenticeship program or some other type of industry professional that I think they all need to be part of these advisory committees and expert review teams. That the apprenticeship programs that I've been a part of have been joint programs, and that labor and the employers are represented for us. So I think that is just a natural way of doing things into the future, is that there's a labor representative from that occupation and employer representatives from that occupation. But other industry professionals and let's say in the construction world, engineers and architects and all of those type people that I think would have very good input. Manufacturers of products in the construction world would have good input on how whichever trade when it comes to construction. But healthcare, I think that's one of the low-hanging fruit in apprenticeship, is that we can get healthcare in, and that we get doctors and nurses and pharmacists and whatever else that we need to be on these advisory committees and review teams is going to make it, so much better. I ran an apprenticeship program for 19 years before I moved up in the world, and we went through audits every couple of years from whichever regulatory agency, and we were associated with more than one, so we were going through an audit every single year at my program. And that I think that these expert review teams are similar to that, kind of doing these audit programs, that between MSDE and us having separate review teams, we should talk about teaming those together. That that I think I'm the apprenticeship expert, but I've never taught in a public high school, and I would need help on how do I come into that public high school and present my apprenticeship program. And I would assume that high school would need help from me on making sure that they cover what's needed to be covered, not just in the industry, but also what's required because it is registered apprenticeship by the DOL and whoever else, that we need to meet these responsibilities of the regulation. So there's, I think I said enough for now.
I think you're right on. And I had something occurred to me, Brian and others, I'd like your thoughts on this, that it also might be good. So, Brian, you said you're an expert on apprenticeships. For at least in my conversations with employers who haven't got apprenticeships yet, who are want to think about this, but haven't done it, I think it would be really helpful to have someone from an industry that is established in apprenticeships, along with experts in the industry that you're looking to build apprenticeships, because there's just an expertise, even though you may not know the ins and outs of what a nurse apprenticeship might look like, or what a, pharmacy tech apprenticeship might look like, what it is to run an apprenticeship. And so in industry, right? And so I feel like that could help. That's what I am hearing from a lot of employers, is that there's sort of they have no idea how to think about starting something like this. And I think hearing from someone, having someone that is also that combined expertise could be really helpful. Does that make sense?
Yep. I mean, exactly the point. Yeah, I think we were talking in the very beginning of your meeting, and Matt was talking about agriculture, and I said it should be easy to make it. I can help you with how to structure it. I just don't know what the industry is, so you got to give me the points to put in the structure, and then I can help you. And I think that anybody that's been around apprenticeship for a long time can help make that structure. We just need the people from industry, for that occupation to help us with what the subject is.
Yeah. What are the requirements? What are the skills? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in to sort of echo all those points. I think one thing we have to think about with these expert review teams is what's the long-term technical assistance. So it's not just about this team coming in, reviewing things, and then you get a report. So to your point, Myra and Brian, it's about, okay, how do we have an apprenticeship technical assistance afterwards? How can, employers in that local region that the schools are already working with, how can they reach out to, I don't know, a apprenticeship ambassador like Brian to kind of walk them through, mentor them through the process. So I think holistically, the technical assistance and sort of the long-term support that these teams are going to provide is something, we definitely have to, think about over this pilot year. And yeah, to your point, I think, having the employers involved with this as much as possible. And we just kind of have to find that delicate line of, we can't have 100 people walking into a school. But how do we balance, what are the real needs here? What are the core CTE programs here? And how can we bring our expertise, our network of employers to kind of help in that process? And the other thing I just wanted to touch on, we are meeting with MSDE tomorrow, actually, to kind of start some of those discussions about how do we collaborate, how do we work together with their expert review team and ours. And then also just wanted to note that the expert review team sort of thought of who would be on it. That's really for potential full implementation. While we're piloting it out this year, we're still obviously sort of playing around with that. And we will be working with the Department of Labor to submit a supplemental budget request so that we can potentially fiscal year 25 and beyond, do this at the scale that's sort of, meant to be in the blueprint. So just wanted to make sure I added those points.
Yeah, Molly, I agree about that. We can't send in a group of whatever number is large into any school or apprenticeship program being, in my apprenticeship program, I didn't want a whole group of regulators coming in to audit me, send 1 or 2 people. And that's what they did. I think that part of this pilot's going to be that we create, I guess, a kind of a checklist, ask these questions, and then we come back to the whole expert review team and say, here's the report of the audit that we did. Do we need to go back? Is anything we need to change? And that's what we do at MATSE now. One person goes in, does an audit, and then they come back and report to us and we ask questions.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think,
Richard,
right.
I think Richard has his hand up and down. So I just want
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Richard.
Thank you, Secretary Wu. So good afternoon, everyone. So I agree, Brian, with everything that you said on that. The 2 things that I would just sort of highlight, to echo what Molly said, MSD, CTE committee staff flagged this a bit ago about how there needed to be strong collaboration between MSDs, teams that are going out. We have a number of schools that we're going to be reviewing this year. And it makes sense that if we were going to be in the same place at the same time, that we should coordinate efforts, because that data that you would collectively get from a visit like that would be pretty substantial. And I think something that would be a missed opportunity if we didn't have that level of collaboration. The second point is, I did want to highlight, being a former campus administrator, when you have an entourage of people show up, you sort of have to weigh how that's disrupting the school day and the students. And at some point, what's the bright line between benefit of the review and then just having a lot of people that sort of disrupt? And I think this pilot is going to do that. With that being said, though, I think it would be a second missed opportunity if we didn't take this time to really think about the supports that are necessary in very specific contexts by programs, by occupational clusters, to then start linking in some of these folks that are part of the expert review team to provide ongoing and sustainable support to these occupations across the state. I would be remiss if I didn't say that a number of our LEA systems have local advisory boards that are made up of, comprised of post-secondary and workforce. Some are stellar and have been for a long time. Some are struggling and need some additional support and guidance. And I think this is a really great way for folks that work on these review teams to plug into that local work, because that's really where at that grassroots level is really where that support and contextual support around industry can be so powerful. And so I would just challenge everybody, write the report, it's great, but then think about long-term, what does that look like? Connecting up teachers and school support staff to the system.
Jason, thank you, Richard.
Yeah, I just wanted to +1 to what Richard said. I'm a recovering local myself, and I think it's such a important goal to have, but it's so hard to achieve, where you have, on the one hand, you need to audit, monitor, and ensure compliance. And on the other hand, we want to offer technical assistance and support. And we want all 5 of those things. It's really hard to be in balance. And I think, again, as just from past experience, not with this, but in other situations, usually it tends to be much more on the audit compliance side. And if that's the vibe that locals are getting, there's going to be some walls that get put up, we're going to get invited in and we'll sit in the classroom, et cetera. But that's not what we want. And if we want to be able to really hit the home run, we're going to have to be really intentional, set the right tone, and make sure that they feel like we're there to actually help them be a stronger program. And again, everyone will agree with that. It's just so hard to do. And I think making sure that we're sharing the learnings, widely, because I also agree with your comments, Myra, about this being macro and micro. All these things are moving fast, and I know that they're hungry to figure this out. And the more if they feel like we're really helping them by offering them something other than a checklist, then I think we'll go a lot further.
Yeah, and thank you. Oh, sorry. And if I may, I just wanted to add to that, I couldn't have said any of that better. And in addition, looking at how these can support each school and improving kind of their offerings and their programs is a really important part of making this a success at that kind of, micro level. But at the macro level, this will also, all of this work with the expert review teams will contribute to our understanding of trends, what's happening that we might need to change at a systems level, what might need to change at a policy level. So these teams will contribute to kind of both that macro and micro level in a really important way. And so I kind of wanted to underscore that for the audience as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and Jackie, I think you were going to say something.
Just to echo Rachel in some ways, and I think the schools, we want to make it clear that the schools are going to contribute to thinking through what kind of policy changes we need at a district and a state level, what kind of policy supports and technical assistance we need for their school and for other schools too. So I think that really is important to be part of the conversation. And then the other thing that we've been talking a little bit about too, that maybe goes to some of the points that have been raised in this conversation, is over time, thinking about the expert review team program as something where we can look at different streams of work. We may want to focus some of the visits on building more apprenticeship programs, or focus on rural issues, or focus on, there's an overall goal of understanding where implementation is across the state, but then could sort of, over each year come up with different focus areas of concern, or places where we think we need support, or places where we can build better understanding and really think through over time. So it really gives us an opportunity to think about, as this program develops over a number of years, of figuring out ways to sort of adapt it and make it more useful as the work progresses.
100%. And that was actually one of my questions, was how do we balance, just personally, I don't want this to feel like an audit. I view the work of this committee as deeply understanding the barriers to having a scaled apprenticeships across the state, and doing the work to figure out how to remove those barriers. And that means, supporting employers, LEAs, individual schools, all of that. So I think, Jason, to your point, it's easy to say that we all believe that. And then I think we just have to be mindful of language. Language matters, how we talk about what we're doing, and then how we actually execute on these visits, and the collaboration with MSDE, Richard, is so important. Being mindful of, hey, these folks in the schools have to deal with a lot of different masters, if you will. Like, it's so how do we make this a support and not a burden? So I know everyone on the committee is committed to figuring out how we do that, both in how we talk about this work and then in how it gets executed. So really good points.
Yeah.
The only other question that I had, and if anyone else has any questions on this, is how do other members of the committee feel about any thoughts about how we as a committee members should be engaged in the expert review teams? Like I can just say for me personally, I would like to go on a couple of visits. I mean, obviously I don't think I could manage 230 or however many it is, but for me, it would be great to be able to, or maybe it's not participate in the visit, but it's, we'd have to figure out like what makes sense for the school themselves. But I think for me, I definitely want to understand deeply what are the challenges that schools are facing, and what are the things that we need to try to address at the systemic level. But I didn't know if others have thoughts about that.
I agree with what you just said. And I think for us to get an understanding, it would be helpful to actually go into the schools and have those meetings. And then just to piggyback off what you said earlier, the communication is essential. Having been a K-12, person for a long time, and the pre-work that goes along with that. So there's an understanding of what the visit's going to be about, and, what the expectation is, the fact that it's not intrusive, all of those type things. But I do feel like in order for us, as a committee to sort of prosper and get better at what we're doing, we should be on the ground within the schools as well.
Chair Norton, I don't know, or Rachel, may you want to talk about, we were just discussing some of these ideas this morning. Similarly, like, do we think about having our committee meeting in a school? Do we, maybe you don't want the review team to be gigantic, but maybe there's a related roundtable or discussion where, individual teachers or students, you can involve sort of more voices in another way to make sure the committee members are hearing those diverse perspectives.
Yeah, and thank you. I was going to kind of jump in with that. I think you summarized it perfectly. That's a conversation we just opened, and would welcome suggestion, whether it's in this discussion or in future meetings and conversations, in perhaps our September meeting. But yeah, that's definitely something we want to think through.
One of the things we've talked about too is seeing how some of the members here could also help us think through how to identify and organize industry input in the visits and community college input in the visits and those kinds of things, which I think a number of you on the call, in the committee would be very helpful in talking through.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I've had the pleasure of talking with John about the work that he's starting and everything. He's very much, I don't mean to speak for you, John, but you're like saying words that came out of his mouth in terms of really, this should be partnership support and doing pre-meetings with schools to really kind of get a feel for what is going to feel good, so that when we actually execute this at scale, it's known and understood and feels like a support and a partnership. So really good work that I know you just started, but you've already had a number of really good conversations with folks on the ground. So that's encouraging. Cool. Anything else? Any other questions?
I think this is Matt. I was just thinking that one of the major things is going to be identifying, direct pathways for these industry groups to be able to make contact and suggest. And so that I'm sure a lot of them are going to watch this meeting. And I know that the ag industry, I've had contacts myself that they're really, chomping at the bit to lend their expertise to these review teams. But we just need to make sure there's a direct pathway for them to be able to get involved and, lend their expertise.
Yes, that's an excellent point. Any other comments or questions on the proposed pilot program? I know we had a couple of suggestions, Molly, in terms of changing some of the language to be a little more expansive and be clear that we don't know exactly what the composition of the teams is going to be. This is, part of what the pilot program is designed to do. Any other concerns? Because we need to have a vote on this proposal, because this will then be submitted to the AIB September 1st. So anyone have any issues with pending the edits, Brian, that you talked about and that others have raised here? Any concerns about submitting this to the AIB?
I think I just was making suggestions for the pilot. If any of those suggestions need to be part of what's submitted to the AIB, okay. But I think I was just.
Yeah, I think just slight language tweaks just to say this is a more expansive. I don't think it's anything major. Like, we don't need to detail everything that you talked about. But I know Molly was taking some notes, thinking about, is there any slight language change we want to incorporate just to make sure that we're capturing the full intent of the committee. Is that fair, Molly? Am I reading your, am I reading?
Yes, yeah, you are. Yeah, no, I think that's the point of this whole discussion is, hearing from you all, getting some input and, making slight amendments to the plan that you received. And we'll send that all to you. And, but yeah, to your point, Brian, it's like, this is what's great about the pilot plan is that we have this year to keep fine tuning all of these pieces. So, what we're submitting to the AIB is just for this pilot year. So it does lend us a lot of flexibility to change things. And I think, over time, we might put together a plan for next year. And then in a couple of years, we're going to find other tweaks along the way. It's going to look different. And that's what's exciting. That's why we submit a plan every year. And we keep working through these things. So thank you.
Great. Okay, if there are no other comments or concerns, I'd like to move that we approve the draft pilot ERT plan to be submitted to the AAB.
I'll second.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone opposed? Okay, so moved. Molly and team will submit that to the AIB, and that'll be another great step forward in this process. And then as a committee, we'll be talking, Brian, Matt, others will be talking extensively about what this pilot plan needs to look like, and who's involved, and all of those pieces.
I guess, Myra, just real quick, back to the funding point. I know Brian brought it up, but on the out years, on the next 2 years, what's our funding prospects look like, and who's leading that charge? And I don't want us to do this exercise and then find out we don't have the funding to put these great teams together. So how do we make sure that happens?
That's a great, I mean, I could take a shot at this, but I'm gonna let Molly.
Yeah, so we actually just met with our budget analyst, so we will be submitting a supplemental budget request. And so we'll be working over that over the upcoming month, and that will be for fiscal year 25. And so we're putting together, we've been working with, Jackie and her team, and John and internally, to figure out, what is the staffing, what's the salaries, what are the travel stipends, and, miscellaneous costs that you have to kind of think through to project. So we'll be working on that supplemental budget request, and then working with the, Department of Labor to submit that. And then my understanding, this is our first time doing it, but is that the Department of Bureau Management will then be sort of reviewing it. And then sort of over the upcoming next year is when sort of the governor's budget and those sort of things get submitted. And then, of course, the Maryland General Assembly, both the Senate and House side, might make tweaks to the budget through the legislative session, and then they kind of join their budgets towards the end of session. So we will see. But I think it sounds like pretty straightforward process. And so we will know before we get into, fiscal year 25 and needing to submit a report about where we're at and what we can support from a staffing standpoint.
That's just another thing that you're asking, what members of the CTE committee can do. If you need us to be cheerleaders, then reach out to our representatives, delegates, cabinet members, any of that, just please let us know, and I'd be happy to do that. Sure.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that.
Also, this is occurring to me, Molly, but it might be good to run what we're by the committee, what we're planning to ask for, because we want to make that ask right the first time. And as we've talked about some of these potential tweaks to how we're thinking about the pilot plan and what that might mean, it'd probably be good to get this group's, minds around, are we asking for the right things, if the timeline allows us to do that.
Yeah, no, we're absolutely planning to share that with you all. And so that'll definitely be part of what's coming up over September.
Great. Okay. All right. Anything else on expert review teams? Okay. I just want to remind everyone in our May meeting, we launched a new system so that members of the public can submit written comments and questions to the committee. That can be done via a Google form link that is on the CTE committee website or through email, either way. Depending on how full our meetings are, we will answer questions that we can in the meeting. And if we're unable to get to all the questions, they will always be listed in the FAQ doc on the website. So please know any question that is submitted will be answered in one format or the other. And any of the sort of substantive questions that are submitted will be in that FAQ doc, even if we answer them here in a public meeting. I do want to just highlight for folks that we're trying to be really thoughtful when we draft responses to these questions, right? Because this is, we're going to go back to that word of collaboration. All of this work is a collaboration between the AIB, the CTE committee, and MSDE. And so we as a CTE committee don't want to put a response out without ensuring that our partners are aligned with the language and the response that we're using. We don't want to be giving slightly different responses in different contexts. So we have a really collaborative process to make sure that we're incorporating a full response. We might give a narrow response based on the CTE committee's, purview, but MSDE may have broader context that they want us to include in the response. So that, given that we are working through that collaboration, it may take a little bit longer for us to get some of the responses posted, but trust me, they are all, every question will be responded to, and you can have confidence that that response is coming from the joint wisdom of these three groups. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. I said this earlier, but I just want to say it again. Any comments or questions that are submitted in the live stream chat, we will respond to following the meeting. We're, due to some technical glitches, we're unable to respond to them in real time. But same thing applies there. So anything submitted in the live chat will receive a response as well. Today, we wanted to share one response to one of the questions that was submitted from our prior meeting. And the question was, are there any tax breaks or incentives for businesses to offer apprenticeships? Great question. There's an apprenticeship tax credit in Maryland that allows an employer to make a claim against state income tax for each qualifying registered and or youth apprentice they employ in a taxable year. For the first 5 eligible apprentices claimed, taxpayers can receive $3,000 per registered apprentice and $1,000 per youth apprentice. Taxpayers may receive $1,000 per eligible registered apprentice for all others claimed in excess of the first 5. So $3,000 for the first 5 registered, and then $1,000 for each one following. There's more information about this on the Department of Labor's website, and we'll post a link to this website in our updated FAQs. So the response to this question will be posted in our FAQs, and we'll also have a link to more information about the tax breaks and incentives there. But we wanted everyone to be sure that there are incentives to sponsor apprenticeships. Any questions or comments on that from folks? Any other business from the committee? Any other items that folks wanted to discuss today? Okay, Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you for closing remarks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you all. I found this to be a really rich and engaging discussion. And it's already given me a lot of ideas about how we can continue to engage committee members, even in between our public meetings, as we continue to develop some of our plans. So thank you. To kind of recap what we've accomplished this meeting, we have approved the expert review team pilot plan for this upcoming school year, which includes some further development and refinement of the expert review team composition and how they're going to go about their school visits and all the communications with our stakeholders before and after those visits. So we look forward to working through that with you all this fall as laid out in that pilot plan. So we will present that to the AIB in advance of our deadline on September 1st. So thank you all for that. In our upcoming meetings, we're going to dig into career counseling plans, best practices around career counseling, and we'll also provide some more learning opportunities on Perkins programs as we revisit and discuss our Perkins MOU between the CET committee and MSDE, as Myra noted earlier, and as we begin to have some of our initial collaborative Perkins planning discussions this fall. So really looking forward to digging into those conversations in our future meetings here as well. And we'll also be thinking, as mentioned earlier, about ways to kind of communicate with and engage our LEAs, our many stakeholders, employers throughout this process, and even in these meetings in coming months, excuse me. So I'm looking forward to that too. So excited to be working with you all on this again. And as I get my arms around everything going on, I just want to say thank you all again for all of the work that's already gone into this to get us up to this point. And I actually want to give a shout out in particular to Molly, my deputy director for the CT committee. She's been, carrying a lot on her shoulders while our team is a little short staffed. And during this transition period, as I get onboarded. So Molly, thank you so much. And thanks to the rest of the team here at DOL, the team at MSDE and AIB for welcoming me, and committee members for everything you've done so far. Excited for what's ahead. We've got a lot to do. So let's get started. All right, Myra, I'll turn over to you to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, folks, I think we have done good work today. Thank you all for your input, and we'll be in touch on a number of these fronts. Could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned, and we will see you all soon. Have a good day.
Thank you.
See you, folks.